Doodlebud here. Thought I would chat a little bit about this topic quickly. Go through a phase of your fountain pen introduction to just getting some basic pens. You start off with like a Lamy Safari or a Twisby or just a few $2, $3, $4, $5 pens you find online pretty cheap. But then you step up and go, I like fountain pens. I'm going to get into it. So you get some nicer ones. You spend $60 or $80. You get some nice, cool, pretty pens. You get some metal pens that are well built from big brands and they're working great and you love them. You have a trusty pocket pen that's with you 24/7, and you even saved up a few more dollars if your budget allows you, and you've gotten some nice Grail pens, and you really enjoy your collection. You like them, but it's what seems to happen with the hobby is there's always more. There's the next one, but sometimes you're just kind of bummed out. There's nothing that's really catching your eye, at least with the modern pens. There's no point in just getting this one in another color. You think you want something different. So may I suggest to you something different, and that different is vintage pens. So by no means am I some vintage pen collector or know everything about vintage pens. There's tons of people online that do. But that's sort of an area that gets overlooked, and I find you can get some pretty cool pens, a lot of bang for the buck at, for some nice prices and get some all sorts of cool features. So I'm just going to roll through some of my vintage pens. I have actually all of them I'll roll through. I have a couple more. And just chat about them a little bit and why I think maybe put a vintage pen on your list for something to pick up if you haven't done so yet. So let's quickly roll through the vintage pens I have and just some of the things I like about vintage pens. So first, when you compare them to modern ones, a lot of times it's sort of solid colors, for like 50s, 60s solid colors. You might not like that, but there are still some cool patterns and materials. Take this little Esterbrook. It's got some nice kind of swirls to it, nice and shiny, nice and bright. This was actually my first vintage pen, all of $40. So, that's a pretty good deal for a vintage pen. Works quite well. It's not my absolute favorite, but there's tons of nib options. This one comes with an oblique broad, which is really cool for a stock nib. So sometimes, you just get fine nibs or medium nibs, and that's about it. If you check out vintage pens, you can get some pretty cool nib grinds. Another cool thing with vintage pens is different filling systems. Now, they might not be as easy to work with sometimes as cartridge converter pens and stuff like that, but they still work just fine and they're quite dependable. Yes, they might have to get resacked, but here you have a lever filler, kind of a cool filling system. So that's something different than getting another cartridge converter pen. Maybe check out a vintage one. But yeah, this pen works quite well, fairly reliable. They are a little bit smaller. So here's some older Schaefers. This one was a gift. You know who you are who gave it to me. Pen's in fantastic condition. It's also got a gold nib. So for surprisingly low price points, you can pick up some gold nibs on vintage pens. If that's something you haven't done yet, is get a gold nib. Well, this is sometimes a pretty economical way to get into it. Now, again, it's not maybe as flashy, being brown and gold. It's maybe not all the flashes the new ones do, but this thing works extremely well. You can buff it if it gets a little bit scratched, no problems. But look at this grip section. It's actually got some grip on it. They put some thought into that as well. Fits comfortable in the hand. For being such a small pen, it still works pretty well. And it's got a cool vacuum filling system as well. Pull it out. I'm not going to go crazy because I think there might be a little ink in here, but you got a vacuum filler too. So a lot going on in a little package. Plus, look how quick this cap goes on. It's literally, I think, 3/4 of a turn, and it's on there, maybe even less. You get some that have some cool history to them. So this one over here doesn't quite fit in the pen box all the way. This is my North Korean fountain pen. Now I got this thing I think again, I got it for $40. And that's, as a build quality on the pen, it's about a $3 or $4 pen. Okay, so, but it comes from North Korea. That's interesting. It does have a gold nib, albeit 12 karat, but it's a bit of a hokey pen. But the reason I got this one is, it's from North Korea, man. I don't have anything from there. And the build quality is pretty horrible, but it's interesting because it tells a bit of a story. So that's sort of unique with the pen. That might not be the first one you go for, but an interesting piece to own. Then here's this other one here. This is a former Soviet Union pen. And just when we thought, things were sort of okay with Russia, we see what's going on now, which is just absolutely insane. But here's a pen from the former Soviet Union. Looks very much sort of like a Malt Blonde pen, some of those features as well. Cool gold nib. Again, a bit of a different filling system than I've seen before. It's like a built-in, it looks like a converter piston deal, but it's just a piston thing. So it's, I've never seen this anywhere on any pen before. Very interesting, but the pen works quite well, very dependable. Nice little nib, extra fine, works great. Then you can move on and, you know, get a pen that's similar to the other one. This is another Schaefer that I have. I got to restore it. So still work in progress. And if the plain sort of colors isn't doing it for you as much, there's all sorts of interesting materials they used. Lots of cool stripes, similar to, you know, stripes you'll see a lot of times in some Pelicans and whatnot. Beautiful stamping. This thing's in actually pretty decent condition. I just got to service the filling system. It does, however, have some dents in the cap. There they are. So someone was maybe playing drummer boy with this pen and dented the cap. You dingus. But anyways, I got a bit of a deal on that because of that. And I have a tool in mind I'm going to make to get those dents out. We'll see how it goes. If I do, I'll do the restore video. And it has an interesting little nib too. Here, I guess they're like that from the factory. They're bent up just a touch. Not like a feud nib like we have today or those Fude nibs. But it's bent up just a touch. Again, gold. I got this thing for, I think, maybe a $60 range. So pretty good find. And that's another kind of a fun part with vintage pens is there's the hunt, there's the find, right? There's the pursuit. It's sort of fun to go after. This is a nice little Omas 88 vintage one. Nice gold cap, beautiful sleek design. Piston filler as well. And the nib is sort of semi-flex. Feels great in the hand. It's not perfect. The cap on it is a little loose. So that's only negative with the pen, but other than that, writes wonderfully, has a piston in it as well. I don't think this is filled up. Is it? Oh, there we go, wrong way. So actually, oh, there's a little water. There we go, it's coming out. When you move the piston up and down, okay, let me get a Kleenex, there we go. When you move the piston up and down, I cleaned it and there's still a little water on there. You're driving the piston up and down, the piston mechanism on this one doesn't back off like on modern piston pens. It still stays at that same depth, so it actually has a very interesting mechanism in there that drives the piston up and down, and you don't really see that on other pens. And a cool little ink window there as well if the focus cares to stay focused. So yeah, just different things. Then of course there's this Schaefer PFM version 5 that I have. I really enjoy this pen. I did a restoration video on this. I have videos, I think, on pretty much all these pens here. And yeah, the one thing with the vintage pens, they're a little bit smaller. I got a pretty decent sized hand. They call this the PFM, pen for men, because men are supposed to have bigger hands. But anyways, I do have fairly large hands. So this pen's just a little bit thicker, a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier. And it fits just super nice on my hand. I think that looks really classy. Mine was a little bit cheaper because the dots pressed in and it needed some work on it. So this was about 300 bucks I picked it up for. And just look at that beautiful nib that's on there. So that's really nice. They don't make them like they used to. These nice fine lines, these little stripes here, gold cap. And to top it off, it's got a really interesting filling system. Let me get the Kleenex again to make sure. I think this is empty because I did a bit of a washing. And so you turn the back cap here again. You can watch my restoration video on it. There we go. And it has a snorkel. So a snorkel filler. You can go like right to the bottom of the bottom of a bottle to get that last little bit of ink, and you're not getting stuff all over the nib. So interesting filling system that's not around today. Maybe it's not around for a reason, but it is pretty neat. It's not too crazy. It's a little bit more than a regular Sakta service, but I had a good time restoring the pen. There was a lot of fun doing that. And it's got a pretty cool filling system. So you just plunge that, it sucks the ink up, and away goes the snorkel back into the pen. And that's pretty neat. So there's all sorts of neat stuff like that. And the last one here in this box, I got two more pens to show you really quick. This is my vintage Parker 51. And I got to tell you, for a pen, that if you just want one that's going to write real quick and don't have to worry about hard starts and the thing just works, this thing's always ready to go. Actually, I haven't touched this pen in several months. Let me grab a piece of paper here. Okay, I haven't used this literally for months. You shouldn't leave it like that, but whatever. I put a safe ink in there. And let's see if this will do it. And of course, it doesn't miss a beat, pretty smooth. And it just writes. You type, jot down your quick note that you need to jot down in your notebook and pop it back in. And even if you don't touch the pen for a few months like I just did, the thing still writes Boom. And so that's what you want in a nice sort of kind of perfect pen. Just a quick draw, write your note, put it back away, and even forget about it. And it's just going to work right away. So Parker 51. If you get one of those, you can get some other models that are a little bit cheaper as well. This one isn't even the gold nib. It's the alloy nib, the Octavian, I think they called it something like that. Writes really well. I enjoy it. Just realized I forgot to mention this pen. So this is a Montblanc 24. There's the snowflake we could see as well. So I always thought, I've really enjoyed my Montblanc 149 that I have. And I thought maybe I should get a vintage one to see what these are all about. They are much more reasonable price point wise. Well, depending what you get, you can obviously get crazy expensive Montblanc pens. Everyone knows that, but you can get some lovely vintage pens that perform quite well for a really good price. So I think this is maybe a little bit over 200 Canadian, maybe it's 220 or something like that. Piston filler as well, works really nicely. Post on there, just a nice writing pen, just fits in the hand. Big section, so you can, stretch out wherever you like to hold your pen. If you like to be back here or like this or stagger up close, you got lots of room. Gold nib, yes, it doesn't look crazy fancy, but this is an oblique broad nib in gold. And man, this is one of, if not the best writing pen I have. And for that price point, 200 or 220 or wherever it was I paid, Canadian dollars, I think that's a fair exchange. Like, don't we all want to get a pen that we're blown away with how well it writes? And you can go spend 200, 300, 400, 500 and have something that you get a little disappointed with the writing experience. Again, what I like versus what you like could be very different, but happy with the pen for sure. Piston fill works nicely, got it in good condition. Something to consider if you want a Malt Blanc but don't want to pay the new prices, check out vintage. So these are my last two vintage pens. I just recently got it. This was my most recent acquisition. This is an Omas 556F. So it's got the faceted, it's got a gold nib, and it's also a springy, bouncy flex nib. So I just did a review. You can watch the review on that one. Piston filler, all sorts of good stuff. This is a more expensive pen. This one isn't as crazy. So this is a Pelican 140 vintage one as well. Looks sharp. Yeah, maybe it's not as pretty as the new ones. The nibs maybe aren't as big and have the beautiful scroll work as the brand new 805 does, let's say, for example. But man, this nib performs. This one is inked. And you also get some flex. So for this pen, I think it was somewhere right around 200 bucks Canadian I picked it up for. So it writes real nice. And then it's got some lovely flex to it as well. Look at that. It's just a real natural writer, and even for your printing, just a little bit of pressure and you get some cool flare, or you can go super light pressure and just get a consistent line. But yeah, for the price point, definitely something to consider. And closing it off, even for, one of the grailest of grail pens, the Malt Blanc 149, I don't know if this is really super vintage. It's kind of later 80s, so it depends what you consider vintage. I don't really think of vintage when I think of late 80s. That could be to do with my age. But I saved a significant amount of money of picking up a 149 versus buying one new. So about $300 for this vintage one. I got it on an auction versus whatever these are brand new, a lot. And, it wasn't perfect the way I got it. I wanted to get a kind of a fancy nib on a pen like this. It just came with a fine. The fine actually didn't work that well. There's a reason maybe this pen was old stock, new old stock, because the nib wasn't great. And no one's going to drop that kind of coin back then on a pen this expensive. But that's okay. Then you can just grind it. So this is a fine cursive italic. And I absolutely love how this pen writes. It's just got a little bit of line variation, but I still like a fine nib. But this one just has a tiny little bit of flare, as you can see there on those cross strokes and stuff. So yeah, really enjoy how this pen writes. It hasn't let me down at all. And I feel the price point was much more reasonable on this used one that was pretty much new anyways versus getting a brand new one. There we go. Thanks for checking out my vintage pens. Another thing I didn't mention with them is also they're collectible, right? So, I don't know if your TWSBI Eco in black is overly collectible, but you know what I mean? But if, a lot of these pens can go up in value. Maybe you buy it for 40, 60 bucks, put a little work into it, and now you can sell it for 200, or you just keep it around for a while and it appreciates in value, which is kind of neat. Also, they tell a story, whether it's the story of the manufacturer, the era when the pen was made and why the pen was made a certain way because maybe things were going on and some materials weren't available, or maybe just the people who used to use these pens, or just who actually owned this pen before you. You'll probably never know the story. And, why was this pen up for sale on eBay? Why would you get rid of that pen? I don't know. Maybe you can make one up in your mind. But anyways, those are just some thoughts and my thoughts on vintage pens. Please feel free to share your thoughts in the comments below. And if you have any vintage pens, maybe your favorite ones and ones you would recommend for someone just getting into vintage pens. So there we go. We'll leave it at that for now. And like I said, you can only have so many TWSBI Ecos or Lamy Safaris until you go, I need to get something different. Maybe this will be that something different. We will catch you next time.